The Blackwood Mansion stood atop a jagged cliff like a mourning widow. For decades, it had been a place of whispers and shadows. The townspeople of Raventree avoided the iron gates, claiming the air around the estate tasted of copper and old secrets. This was the fortress of Victor Blackwood, the man once known as the undisputed king of the continental underworld. Now, he was a ghost, a recluse rumored to have lost his mind to the violence of his past. Elara stood before those gates, her small suitcase clutched in a trembling hand. She didn't come for the money, though the pay was astronomical for a simple maid. She came because she had no other choice. Her brother owed a debt to the very men Victor Blackwood used to command, and this job was her only way to buy his freedom. As the heavy gates creaked open without a soul in sight, she felt the weight of 1,000 eyes watching her from the dark windows. The interior of the mansion was a graveyard of opulence. Dust danced in the slivers of moonlight that managed to penetrate the thick velvet curtains. The air was heavy with the scent of aged mahogany and something metallic, like cold steel. There was no welcoming committee, only a set of strict instructions left on a silver tray in the foyer. Rule number 1 was simple but terrifying: never enter the west wing after midnight. Elara's footsteps echoed through the hollow halls as she moved toward the kitchen. She began her work immediately, cleaning surfaces that hadn't been touched in years. She felt a presence behind her, a cold draft that made the hair on her neck stand up. Turning slowly, she saw nothing but a flickering candle. She realized then that the mansion wasn't just old, it felt alive, as if the walls themselves were breathing. On her third night, Elara heard the sound for the first time. It was a low, mournful melody played on a piano, coming from the forbidden west wing. It wasn't the music of a madman, it was a song of profound grief. Driven by a curiosity she knew was dangerous, she followed the sound. She climbed the winding staircase, the shadows stretching and twisting around her like reaching fingers. She reached a set of massive oak doors. The music stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was even more terrifying than the melody. Before she could turn back, the door swung open. A man stood there, silhouetted against a fireplace. He was tall, his shoulders broad, wearing a silk robe that looked like liquid midnight. This was Victor Blackwood. He didn't look like a monster, he looked like a fallen god. "I gave you a list of rules, Elara," his voice said, a deep, resonant rumble that seemed to vibrate in her very bones. He didn't look at her, yet she felt his gaze pinning her to the spot. "Do you find it difficult to follow instructions, or do you simply have a death wish?" Elara swallowed hard, her voice barely a whisper. I heard the music. I thought someone was in pain." Victor finally turned his head. A jagged scar ran from his temple to his jaw, a brutal reminder of the world he had left behind. His eyes were not the eyes of a madman, but of strategist who had seen too much. "Pain is the only thing this house produces," he said, stepping into the light. "Go back to your room. If I find you here again, you will learn why the world believes I am a beast." Elara didn't run. She stood her ground, her eyes meeting his. "The world is usually wrong about things it's afraid of," she said. Victor froze, a flash of genuine surprise crossing his dark features. For a moment, the tension between them was electric, a collision of two lonely souls in a house built on blood. Then, with the flick of his hand, he dismissed her, retreating back into the shadows of the west wing. The next morning, Elara found a rare black rose on her cleaning trolley. There was no note, but she knew where it came from. As she cleaned the library, she discovered a hidden compartment in a desk. Inside was a ledger filled with names of judges, politicians, and rival Mafia lords. She realized then that Victor wasn't hiding because he was crazy. He was hiding because he held the Black Ledger, a document that could set the entire underworld on fire. Suddenly, the front doors of the mansion were kicked open. 3 men in tactical gear, carrying silenced weapons, breached the foyer. They weren't there to talk. They moved with the lethal efficiency of professional hitmen. Elara ducked behind a marble statue, her heart hammering. She realized the outside world had finally tracked down the ledger. Victor was no longer just a recluse, he was a target, and she was trapped in the crossfire. She heard a gunshot from the floor above, followed by a heavy thud. The hitmen were heading straight for the west wing. Elara knew she should run for the back exit, but she thought of the man playing the piano in the dark. She thought of the black rose. Without thinking, she grabbed a heavy brass fire poker and began to climb the servant stairs, hoping she wasn't too late to save the beast of Blackwood. Elara's lungs burned as she reached the upper landing. The silence of the mansion had been replaced by the rhythmic thud of tactical boots and the sharp metallic click of weapons being readied. She stayed low, moving through the shadows like the dust she spent her days cleaning. Ahead, she saw two of the hitmen standing outside the oak doors of the west wing. They were placing a small, high-tech explosive charge on the lock. Before they could detonate it, a shadow detached itself from the ceiling. Victor didn't use a gun. He moved with a savage, animalistic grace. He dropped on the first man, his blade finding a gap in the tactical vest with surgical precision. The second man swung his rifle around, but Victor was already moving, using the first man as a shield. The hallway erupted in a muffled burst of gunfire, the bullets shredding the ancient wallpaper. Elara saw a third man sneaking up behind Victor from a side corridor. He was raising a pistol to the back of his head. Without thinking, she stepped out of the shadows and swung the brass fire poker with every ounce of her strength. It connected with the hitman's wrist, the gun skittering across the floor. The man growled, turning toward her, but his eyes widened as Victor's hand clamped onto his throat like a vice. Victor slammed the attacker against the wall, his eyes glowing with a terrifying, cold fury. With a sharp twist, the man went limp. Victor dropped him and turned to Elara. His face was splattered with blood, his breathing heavy. For a moment, the beast was fully visible, and Elara felt a wave of pure, primal fear. But then, Victor reached out and gently took the fire poker from her trembling hands. "I told you to go to your room," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Why didn't you run?" Elara looked at the carnage in the hallway and then back at him. "The gates were locked," she lied, her voice shaking, "and I didn't think you should fight them alone." Victor let out a dark, dry laugh. He pulled her into the west wing and slammed the doors, locking them with a heavy iron bolt. The west wing was different from the rest of the house. It was filled with monitors, maps, and ancient books. In the center of the room sat a massive iron safe. Victor went to a desk and pulled out a hidden compartment, revealing a gold-plated revolver. "They're not here for me, Elara. They're here for the ledger. It contains the names of the 7 families and their offshore accounts. If that book leaves this house, the world burns." Suddenly, the house shook. A second team had entered from the roof. Dust fell from the ornate ceiling as heavy footsteps thudded above them. Victor grabbed a leather bag and shoved the ledger inside. He turned to a bookshelf and pulled a hidden lever. A section of the wall groaned and slid open, revealing a narrow stone staircase. "This leads to the sea caves below. You take the bag and go. I'll hold them here." "No," Elara said, grabbing his arm. "You're not leaving me. You're wounded." She pointed to his shoulder, where a bullet had grazed him during the struggle. Victor looked at her, his expression softening for a fraction of a second. "You are just a maid, Elara. Why do you care if a monster lives or dies?" She stepped closer, the smell of gunpowder and black roses surrounding them. The doors of the west wing began to buckle under the pressure of a battering ram. Victor realized he couldn't argue. He grabbed her hand, his palm was hot and calloused, and pulled her into the secret passage. They descended into the cold, damp darkness of the cliffside. The stairs were steep and slick with moss. Above them, they heard the doors finally give way, followed by the frustrated shouts of the mercenaries. They reached a hidden grotto where the ocean waves crashed against the jagged rocks. A small black speedboat was moored to a rusted iron ring. Victor jumped in and pulled Elara down just as a red laser dot appeared on the stone wall behind them. A sniper was positioned on the balcony high above. Victor fired his revolver upward, the muzzle flash illuminating the cave, and then slammed the boat's engine into gear. The boat roared to life, cutting through the dark water. As they cleared the sea cave, the moonlight hit the mansion one last time. From this distance, it looked like a crumbling tooth in a giant's mouth. Elara looked at Victor, who was steering the boat with one hand while clutching his bleeding shoulder with the other. He looked exhausted, the weight of his empire finally catching up to him. "Where are we going?" Elara asked over the roar of the wind. Victor looked towards the horizon, where the first hints of dawn were breaking. To a place where the 7 families can't find us. A place where I can finally burn that book, and you can finally be more than a maid. He reached out and touched her cheek, his fingers surprisingly gentle. But first, we have to survive the morning, and they are coming. The speedboat carved a white scar across the black velvet of the ocean. By the time the sun began to peek over the horizon, the Blackwood Mansion was nothing more than a silhouette against the cliffs. Elara looked at Victor, who was steering the boat with one hand while clutching his bleeding shoulder with the other. He looked exhausted, the weight of his empire finally catching up to him. "Where are we going?" Elara asked, over the roar of the wind. Victor looked towards the horizon, where the first hints of dawn were breaking. To a place where the 7 families can't find us. A place